everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences.
Get on with it.
So today I'm taking a look at Mythic Mischief. This is from IV Games, and all I know about IV Games is that they did Moonrakers. And that was about it. I know nothing else. I haven't even had a chance to play that game, or see it in person, or anything. You know, so I'm pretty much going into this one totally blind. Thanks for the review copy though, but I literally did not know this game existed before it was offered, so this was like a nice little welcome surprise. But in fact, you know, normally, oh yeah, I've heard of this game, I'm intrigued or whatever, but sometimes it's nice just to get a game out of the blue and just go, that looks pretty cool, let's give it a shot. So I jumped into it, and it's a case of whether it was any good or not. So in Mythic Mischief, you are effectively a faction out of various like monster races like zombies and Frankenstein's monsters, wizards, vampires, and potentially some extras. Think the Wednesday Netflix series type school. It's basically that sort of setting. And you're in a library, and you have control of various mythics, which are your characters, and your opponent will also have their own mythics, depending on their faction. What you're doing is basically trying to collect these little tomes, which are basically stacks of books, in order to upgrade your abilities. But in order to win the game, you're trying to get to 10 points by getting this Tomekeeper, which is basically this giant sort of teacher that goes around the place. And you're trying to get the Tomekeeper to run into the opponent's mythic characters. Every time that happens, you score a point. First to 10 wins. The tomes don't score you points, but they do upgrade your ability so that you have more movement or more means to use your various like special sort of like skills that you have as a faction. The game plays for 2 phases effectively. The Tomekeeper moves to 3 different locations as prescribed by a before lunch card, and then once that's done you then switch up to an after lunch card, and essentially it rinses and repeats. It goes to another 3 locations, and then you see what the position is like at the end of that. So to quickly get out of the way, Moonrakers looked very good in terms of component quality on the table. This is no exception. It's a pretty big, sturdy box. It's got a very thick rule book, mainly just because it's small, but you've got dual layer boards for all the different factions. You've got unique miniature sculpts. The Tomekeeper is just a big lump of plastic, molded into a miniature. It's like, Jesus, this thing's like big and chunky. You've got linen finished cards. You've got a fold-out board that's nice and small. You've got, these sort of plasticky bookshelves that go around, so it creates the little map. Game trays, little dice, tomes, which are, they're not cubes. They actually are 2 books stacked on top of each other. Yeah, component quality is not a problem with this game. It looks gorgeous, and you're definitely getting your money's worth on that front. Now the thing to bear in mind with this game is that it's a little misleading from the cover and the components as to what kind of game you're getting here. When I looked at this, I thought, oh, this is going to be some like crazy, whimsical little game, a little bit of ha-ha, chuckle, that sort of thing. It's not. It really isn't. I should have actually had a little bit of a trip from the 45 to 90 minute timer on the box. It's like, seems quite long for a game that I'm expecting to be some sort of quick ha-ha affair, and it's like, nope. It is not that at all. This is a fairly thinky, heads down, abstract game. Yeah, it's got, different races and different little abilities and that, but at the end of the day, it's basically a glorified chess game where you're essentially trying to think, right, with the use of these action points and abilities I've got, how can I manipulate this library, move this bookshelf in order to get the Tomekeeper to go to that space where that person's going to be, and it's like, whoa, okay, this is not the kind of game I was expecting. So if you're going into this thinking this is like some, nice little kid-friendly, basically like taking the mick out of itself style game, it's not. This is a proper abstract. If anything, it's a slightly overproduced abstract, because you've got these gorgeous components for what is essentially a cross between chess and Dungeon Twister, if you remember that game. Now the rules of the game are not too complex, but the rulebook is a little bit long-winded. I mean, for a box this big, the rulebook isn't exactly a big part of it. I almost sort of think, you could have made the rulebook bigger if you're going to have a box this big, just to mean that it's not such a thick load of pages. Because even though the rules aren't complicated, this rulebook is a little bit long-winded. I mean, you go through like about 12, 13 pages, 15 pages, before you even get to the ready-to-play section. All of this is just setup and contents and components and, what the anatomy of everything is. And then you've got the ready-to-play, then you've got on your turns that go on for another God knows how many pages, and then you've got the solo mode, you've got all the abilities. It's quite a long-winded book. Takes a while to find what it is you need to know in here. Now, you do have some reference cards, which are half decent. I mean, they don't explain a ton of everything, but they do at least give you some pictorial representation of how certain movements work. and help to clarify the cleanup phase a little bit, which is a good thing, because one thing about this game is that it's not the most intuitive ever. There's a system with the dice for your abilities, and I'm used to seeing like a token on the track that just says, oh, I've got 4 of this, 5 of this, 6 of this. It doesn't work that way with this. I'm using a different colour, but so sue me. The idea is that the slots are numbered, and if a die is in that slot, it is that number. So if it's in the 3rd slot, it's a 3. If it's in the 4th slot, it's a 4. But what these dice are is they basically correspond to the number of action points you have for that particular action. So the first dice is worth 1, the second dice is worth 2, the next one is worth 3. So you're not getting 1, 2, 3 action points. You're getting 1, then 3, then 6, then 10. It goes up in that weird scale for some reason. And then on the cleanup phase, you're supposed to use the tomes you've got to slot them into the first bits on your skills, but then you have the ability to boost them further, and then you reset your dice to as far left as they can go, and then reset their values. It's not too complex, but it's just a little bit hard to teach some aspects of this game. Woe betide you if you get anybody with analysis paralysis, though. This is very thinky, because take a game like 5 Tribes, for example. It's downstairs, actually. 5 Tribes is one of those games where you have a lot of options at the start, but then your options contract and there's not so many, and then, you know, you're really fighting for those points. Here, it's the complete polar opposite. At the start, you don't have a lot of options because you don't have many abilities to begin with, or certainly not many power points. And then as soon as the game carries on and on and on, you start leveling up, your abilities and your amount of skill points go off the chain. To the point where you actually reach points where you feel like you've got too much. Like, I've got too many action points that I need for this turn. But because you have this plethora of action points to spend, guess what happens when you have games with lots of action points to spend? The analysis thinking time takes longer and longer and longer. This is why it's got a 90-minute timer on the box, because it's going to take you anywhere up to 90 minutes just to think about what you're doing. So many different ways that you can manipulate shelves or manipulate mythics and the opponent's mythics and that. You know, they are going to take time to figure out. But then each time you do that, you then have to consider, right, well, how's this Tomekeeper going to move? It's going to take the shortest distance from A to its particular spot it needs to go to. But you've got the shelves that restrict it. You've got, you know, different paths that will open up. You've got these clutter tokens that mean it's 2 movement rather than 1. I mean, just trying to find the shortest path so you can move the Tomekeeper after everybody's had a turn takes about as much time as an actual turn. It takes enough analysis power just to compute where the Tomekeeper is going to go, let alone what you're supposed to do on your turn. And so this game, as I say, turns into what I thought was going to be a kind of laugh out loud chuckle type abstract, and ends up being a very, right, let's think. Gotta do this. Right, how am I gonna do this? And more like a silent affair than anything else. You can play this with 3 and 4 players, so you have like 2 teams of 2, and 3 I think has like 2 people against 1. Honestly, I didn't really enjoy the 4-player that much. I just think it added too much analysis time, because then you've got 2 people debating with each other as well as thinking about their turn, and 3-player was just kind of weird. I just didn't feel like it balanced itself out enough. Really, this is a 2-player or potentially a solo game, because you do have a solo mode in here. Effectively, you're going up against an AI, the Enchanted, and they're trying to steal tomes and try and screw you over, and you're trying to stop them. It functions in pretty much the same way as the multiplayer game for the most part, except you have these cards, of which 3 of them are laid out, and they have special trigger rules as to how things will happen. But then you flip a card off the deck and it will tell you which card to activate. It triggers, the effects goes off, and you do your turn as normal. So it's a neat little puzzle game. A slight bit of randomness, even though it does tell you the distribution of the card triggering cards, so you know that most of the time the left card will trigger, and obviously because you know what effects could happen, you're sort of thinking, well, maybe I should stay out of those areas then, or perhaps I could go to that area, but I'm taking a risk, I better be careful, and it makes for a nice, interesting game. It's not the shortest game ever, because you are still trying to go, think, but solo was fine. Nothing outstanding, but I enjoyed my time with it solo, and I enjoyed some games of this head-to-head. I just don't think the 3 and 4 player is overly necessary. This is really head-to-head chess game or a solo puzzle. The factions you've got are pretty varied. You get 4 in the box: monsters from Frankenstein, wizards, zombies, and vampires. Everybody's got the same move ability, but then their various free abilities afterwards are slightly different, but they basically revolve around how you can move, how you can get the Tomekeeper to move, and what you can do with the bookshelves, because obviously the bookshelf map will never stay like this. I mean, you can start rearranging it like crazy, and then all of a sudden the Tomekeeper takes a different route. But, for example, zombies have got Infect, Toss, and Distract, and Stench. Okay, that makes sense for a zombie. Wizards, Warp, Shift, Distract, and Teleport. You know, it's thematic to what these are, but, like I say, the components give off the wrong impression as to what type of game you're getting. You know, the theme here is, yeah, it's there. Yes, okay, you've named their abilities as such, and in a couple of cases they kind of make sense, but, you know, that's about as far as the theme goes. This could have literally been a fairly bare-bones, abstract, dry theme, and it would still work just fine. But these are quite nice and different, and if you've got the Headmaster version, which is what this is, or if you buy them separately, you can get the Witches, the Trolls, and the Ghosts for 3 more factions. They're fine. They function just like these ones, so it's just a case of whether you want 4 factions or 7. The Headmaster box is obviously more expensive than the base version, and I would probably say that the only reason you get the Headmaster version is mainly because you want the sort of added storage, but also those 3 factions. The only other thing the Headmaster box gives you is this Blitz mode, which enables you to sort of play a kind of like 2-board game with 4 players in semi-real time, and it's, I don't know, I've not played it personally, but honestly it was hard enough trying to get like players for this, you know, for teams of 2 or, you know, 4 players or 2 players, that to try and get people well versed in the game enough to play a 4-player real-time version, it's like, yeah, not really going to happen. So unless you're desperate to do tournaments of this game at your local store, you're not really going to need the Headmaster version of this game. You just might want to maybe buy these 3 separately. But given that adding these 3 separately will probably cost the same as getting the box, you probably might as well just get the box if you want these 3 factions. So by no means essential, it's just out there. So Mythic Mischief for me is one of those really niche games that's fine, it's fun, but it really is a bit of a niche abstract game, because I'm not going to play this with casual players, I'm not going to play this with heavy gamers really, but I certainly don't want to play this with anybody who's got AP. It's not the greatest at 3 and 4 players, so I'm really playing this solo or 2-player, and I don't get 2-player games to the table often anyway, but it's kind of like, who am I playing this with? There's definitely some fun to be had. I mean, it's cool that you have got, you know, unique asymmetric factions, even if it's mainly just a case of, oh, it moves it in this way and this moves it in that way. But the cartoony exterior and component quality gives off a different impression to what the actual game is. The rulebook is not bad, but could be better. It's a bit long-winded for its own good. And certain aspects like how you level up and how certain things work is not the most intuitive area, which makes teaching, again, tricky, hence the niche audience for this. But when you're firing on all cylinders, when you've got everything set up right, it is a pretty decent abstract game. It certainly is one for those who want to sort of knuckle down and think and play a chess-like abstract, and I do like chess-like abstracts. I mean, I used to play chess back at school. I was in a chess club for a school club and a local pub league. It was, you know, it's definitely in my wheelhouse, but, you know, for the production, like the size of the box and the cost of the game and everything, it's maybe just a little overproduced for its own good, but everything looks fantastic, so I can't exactly fault it much there. This for me is a 6 out of 10. It's above average and I think it's fine. There's enjoyment to be had, and if somebody wants to play it, I'll be glad to play it, but I can't see it being a keeper, and I can't see it being one that I'm going to say, oh, you know, can you bring Mythic Mischief this week? You know, I'd like to play that. It's going to be one of those where it's like, oh, I need a 2-player game. I need a 2-player, but oh, Mythic Mischief's up there. You want to learn that? Great. You know, and that'll be the sort of audience. And for that, it's not necessarily endorsement level, but I can see people really getting into this. There are some people out there who adore this and will play this all the time. Then fair play to you. I can definitely see why. For me personally, it's a 6. Still above average, still decent. I can certainly say give it a shot, but maybe it's a try before you buy affair. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, please remember you can thumb it up on YouTube and certainly on Board Game Geek as well. Get it in the hat review section if you can. All the thumbs would be appreciated. Also, check out the Patreon campaign if you want to help support the channel. I've just had my lighting replaced and, you know, it costs a pretty penny, but it's thanks to you, the Patreons, that this channel can keep going, because this is not my main source of income. This is just a hobby. I got a day job on the top of this. So, you know, thank you to all, and I'm very grateful for your support. But also, if you want to check out more content on on the channel, then check out the recent full review that I did for Come Together. Recent game about trying to organize a music festival in a 60s hippie setting. Is it a good worker placement? Does it stand out from the crowd? Well, you'll have to check out the video to find out more. Take care, and remember as always, regardless of whether you can escape the dreaded Tomekeeper or not, it's still only a game. Bye for now.